Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Aaron Urban, certified career strategist and executive coach, helping driven, experienced professionals remove career roadblocks to achieve more impact, influence, and income. And speaking of impact and influence, today I'm very excited to have Larry Levine joining us from the Selling from the Heart podcast and the Selling from the Heart book. Now, Larry, I'll share with you a story really quickly. Now, I met Larry last year in November, actually at a local conference. Larry was speaking. And when I saw who was speaking, even though I'd never met the guy before, I knew I had to go. And when I saw Larry speak, I was like, now that's a guy who really gets what it means to be authentic, impactful, and have influence. So after the show, I went up to him. I said, hey, Larry, how you doing? We started talking like we've known each other for 30 years. And I'm really excited to bring to you today Larry Levine to talk about how to increase your sales influence. So if you're just joining in, pop in the chat, say hi, say your name, say where you're joining from. I'd love to hear from you. And throughout this particular interview, we will be pausing from time to time to answer your comments and questions. So I'd love to hear from you. Say hi, and if you are watching the replay, feel free to pop in your comments. I will see them. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Larry Levine. Hey, Larry, how are you?
Aaron, what's going on? Long time no talk, huh?
I know. Oh, 5 seconds. Someone from Facebook just said good morning. Good morning. Is it morning there?
It's well, okay. By me, it's still morning.
Poor Larry. When we originally started to set up this show, I was like, yeah, we're going to meet at 11. He's like, that's really early. No, I'm kidding. Larry's super important. He was doing some workshops with a client overseas, in fact. And you can see in the background, Larry's Selling from the Heart book. So Larry, talk to us about what it means to increase your influence as a sales professional or as in sales in general, even if you're not a sales professional traditionally.
Well, I'm going to throw a twist on this, Aaron, because that's just what I like doing. But I think that the biggest thing is if we're to become influential, the first person that we have to influence is ourself.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Think about that one for a second.
You're right. You're totally right. Because if you don't believe you have influence, Larry, how in the world are you going to influence anyone else? And I see it all the time. So I'm really glad you brought this up. Whenever I talk to professionals, like coaching professionals about how to increase their influence, they talk about influence and impact like it's something out there, right? They don't own it and they don't realize they have influence. But wouldn't you agree that people have a lot more impact than they give themselves credit for?
Yeah, and this is why, even my whole time in corporate sales, I was really cognizant of how I spoke, how I carried myself, how I acted, because perception in my world matters.
Yeah.
And the way I carry myself and the way I'm perceived matters. And again, so I'm going to throw this out, and so just be prepared, because who knows what's going to come out. But I always say is, I don't have PhD. I have no PhD in human behavior, psychology, anything like that. I always share with people that PhD I learned was from getting the crap kicked out of me my whole life in sales.
All right.
But it's just, there's one thing that I always paid attention to. I was cognizant of my surroundings, and I was cognizant of the interactions I had. And now marry this with the world that we're living in right now.
Mm.
And you can influence people in so many different ways. I can influence people face to face. I can influence people through the written word or through video. I can influence people online and through virtual.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to, I always say to people, you got to believe in yourself. You got to have self-worth. You have to have confidence in yourself.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with that, Larry. I mean, that's a big one. Whenever I start talking about self-worth, people are like, ooh, I don't know about that. And a lot of people also think, well, wait a minute, you're a career coach or you're a salesperson. What are you talking about caring about yourself for? What are you talking about self-confidence? What are you talking about actually giving a crap, about yourself? What's that got to do with anything, right? This is business, right, Larry?
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting, and I, so as we were just before we went live, I was coming off of a call, so I was running a Selling from the Heart webinar with a team in Europe who had a sales team here in the U.S. And we started talking about the whole concept of believability. We
Mm.
started talking about confidence and so forth. And somebody asked me, and it popped up in chat, why'd you write Selling from the Heart the way you wrote Selling from the Heart? And I think if you'll allow me to share, I think it ties in with this whole
Yeah,
influence
yeah.
that you were talking about. Is I can look back on my whole entire career in sales, and I was on more dysfunctional teams with more dysfunctional managers than I care to speak about. But that's just the nature of it, and I get it. But one of the things that I learned a long time ago is as salespeople, right? And let's just take sales out of it, right? You could insert in your job title. A lot of times, the coaching and the training we get at a company level is company centric, it's product
Mm.
centric, it's service centric. It's never about the individual.
That's
The
right.
company, very few, and I know there's some phenomenal, fantastic companies out there that really invest in building up their culture and their people, but they're few and far between.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the missing link in this is how we work on ourselves and how we
Hmm.
become the best versions of ourselves. And it's our ability to influence our thoughts, our minds, right? And I'll even throw in this, influence how we develop new skills and how we develop new relationships. It's all of that is we have to work on ourselves. And that's what I'm bringing out in Selling from the Heart
Hmm.
is we have to do that. We have to do those things, especially in the world that we're living in today.
That's right. I mean, you can't give what you don't have. If you
That's
don't
true.
have, I mean, you can't. If you don't have authenticity, if you don't have that in your heart, if you don't have credibility in your heart, if you don't have courage in your heart, if you don't have, honesty and integrity in your heart, how in the world are you going to give it? You can't.
Well, no, you can't. But that's why I said, authenticity is a lifestyle.
Hmm.
I think I'm a huge Brene Brown fan, so I know that she's out in your neck of the woods. And yeah, really, I'll take my weather over yours any day, Aaron. But
I'll give you that.
but it was I read, geez, it was months ago. I read The Gifts of Imperfection.
Oh man, great book.
Yeah, that book slapped me across the face twice. Right? There's
Yeah.
probably more. Right? So now I'm going to date myself. I actually really love holding a book in my hand, Aaron.
Mm,
So
me
it's
too.
something about holding a book with a highlighter. I just freaking love it. Thank you. Hey, by the way, I didn't prompt. There was no prompting on that. But
No, no, totally. And signed. Up here we go. Signed. See.
hey, by the way, that's one. So it just goes back to, and I love the story on how we met. We're just going to digress all over the place.
Yeah, yeah.
But here's what's interesting is, can I take everyone back to how we met?
Yeah, I introduced that a little bit. Yeah, by all means. I love
But I
your
think it's
perspective because
but I think this is really important as we start talking about impact and influence.
hmm,
And I always share with people, you never know who's watching you.
that's right.
In the world that we live in today, you have no clue who's watching you. You might if they're connected to you or they're following you or something like that, but you never know.
All right.
And this is a perfect example because it was at that event that we met, but you already knew something about me already.
Hmm.
And obviously it was a positive one, or else we wouldn't have connected, and then you wouldn't have come on the podcast, and I wouldn't be here speaking with you.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
yeah.
that, but it's a simple story, but yet sometimes it's so difficult for people to really grasp. Is
Hmm.
how you carry yourself, and I'm a big believer perception matters. In my world, you get one great shot to make a first impression,
That's right.
and if you don't, it doesn't mean that the game's over. It just means you're a salmon swimming upstream. You still have another shot. It's just a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Particularly if
So
you made
if
a wrong impression.
Well, yeah. So now now we take a look at how we can build relationships and connect to people and build deep, meaningful relationships. They can happen in so many different ways,
Hmm.
but it all goes back to, I'm a big believer that, and I'll set the influence thing aside for just a moment. But if we can't work on ourselves, if we can't change ourselves in how we view things, then translate that into the world of working with our clients in whatever capacity you're in. As if we
Yeah.
can't work on ourselves and change ourselves, then how can we ask our clients to change the way they do business?
That is so powerful. I mean, that right there. For all of you that are tuning in, and thanks for tuning in, by the way. Art, Curtis, Jill, thanks for tuning in. She said, I love that. Salmon swimming upstream. Roxanne is like, boom, first one to influence is yourself. That's the first person you should influence. You love that. Hi, hey, Q, nice to see you. But yeah, that was gold. So for all of you tuning in, please feel free to put your comments chat in the chat box. We'd love to see what questions that you have about impact, influence, and how you can grow that. But that is gold right there, Larry. It truly is. Being able to embody that which you want to demonstrate. Because here's the thing, and it took me a really long time to get it as a professional, and it was hard for me because I wanted to believe that I could drive everybody else's perception of me, and you can. Here's the thing, you drive your credibility, but you don't determine it. Other people do, and that's hard to swallow.
Yeah, and if Daryl's watching this, he knows I'm my own worst critic. So Daryl, Amy's my podcast partner, and we talk about this all the time. I'm my own worst critic. Always have been. I'm harder on myself than anybody else is. But it works for me. It's what drives me. It's what lights my fire. So I always pay attention to it, sometimes to my own detriment. But that's why I work on myself so hard. Is for that, because I know that I have one great first shot. And if I blow it, game over. That's why I hold myself to such a high degree of accountability and work on myself and work on how I treat people and how I drive conversations and all that. I'm just massively critical to it. I'm hypersensitive to it. I was when I was in the sales world, and I am now when I work with my clients.
So in this virtual world, Larry, what advice do you have? I mean, we're not as connected, but we're still connected. So we were just talking earlier before we went live that, some of us are using Zoom fatigue as an excuse. I'm one of them. I'm guilty. But we have a huge opportunity in front of us. Just imagine if this had happened 20 years ago, right? So we do have a huge opportunity in front of us, and the future will look a little different, and how can we be as impactful and influential online? Because I've seen a couple of your posts on LinkedIn, for example, Larry, and that's really resonated with me. Would you mind sharing with the folks tuning in right now some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I've always taken, Aaron, a really different approach to how I position myself online. I'm sensitive to what I post. I'm sensitive to what I comment. I walk, talk, and breathe a professional persona online. I'm not saying that everybody has to do that. I just say just be sensitive to it. And I choose to use different platforms for how I position myself out there and who I communicate to. So for instance, if I'm going to expand upon this a little bit more, but I'll use LinkedIn for an example. It's 100% professional for me. No ands, ifs, or buts, no questions about it. I'm critical on what I comment. Everything that I post and engage with is around 3 E's. It's around educate, engage, and excite. That's what I do in my community. That when I post something, I think of those 3 things. Is what I'm getting ready to post going to educate with somebody? Is it going to foster engagement? And will I excite my community into engaging in conversation? I've always played that out. Now, on other social platforms, I bring a little bit of my personality to it, and it might get personal. But I do this for a reason, is in the virtual world, you can still build deep, meaningful connections with people. And it's mindset, right? And some people are going to sit here and go, well, you know what? I love the face-to-face and so forth and so on. I get it, right? I totally get it. I love the face-to-face, the high fives, the bro hugs, right? The hugs and all that. I love that stuff. We just can't do it right now. Doesn't mean that I can't build a great, deep relationship with you, Aaron. Hey, and just an FYI, I've met Aaron once, face-to-face. The relationship that we've built has been in a virtual world.
It's very true.
And that's what I want people to think about. Technology, there's really great things about technology, and I'm not here to poo-pooey technology and downplay it, none whatsoever. I mean, it's bridging our conversation right now. But what I'd like people to think about is when we dehumanize ourselves and hide behind technology, we're cheating
Mm,
people out of getting to know who we really
yeah,
are.
yeah, yeah.
And it's, I mean, I want people to think about in a virtual world, right? I'd say for all intents and purposes, get used to this stuff, right? Get used to integrating this in with how you function in whatever career you're in.
Absolutely.
And to take it one step farther is I'm going to encourage people. You got to push yourself, right? You can tell I'm animated. I'm sorry, I love using my hands, but you got to push yourself through a screen. You got to invite people into a
Mhm.
conversation. You got to pay attention to the words and your messaging, your tonality.
Right. I mean, I will share with you in all transparency that for a while and I could blame it on corporate, right? I was a very good corporate cubicle dweller for many, many years. And I was going on social media, I was telling people, I was telling, tell. Well, that does poop for engagement. As you mentioned, Larry, how can you engage people? Can you ask a question? Can you incite a conversation? That's what it's all about. It's not just about you and what you have to say. It's about hearing what other people have to say and creating a platform and a safe space for them to share and engage and give ideas and give help and virtual high fives. That's what it's all about. And I see a lot of people telling. Well, and particularly, chest beating, right? Look how
Okay,
great
now
I am.
okay, okay, Aaron, you just wound me up. So now I'm gonna go on a roll for a second. There's so much social graffiti being sprayed all over the place because everyone's beating their chest, right? And I've coined this phrase social Pied Piper. There are so many social Pied Pipers out there pontificating. Now, granted, we can, and so let me preface, we can use this platform in a virtual world however we see fit, right? There's enough social police out there to tell you what you're doing right and wrong. But what I want people to be cognizant of in your professional growth, in your career development, you never know. And that's why I've been doing a series of videos on LinkedIn. You never know who is watching you. Never. You never know. There'll be times that I'll get a connection request and I love driving engagement. And somebody in my message center said, you know what? I've been watching your videos or I've been listening to your podcast or I've been reading your blogs and this is the first time I've reached out to you. Oh, how long's this been going on? A year or two?
Yeah.
So when you pontificate, right, and when you tell and yell and do all these things and create your followers, is that the right audience?
That's right. Are you
And
actually
and if
connecting with those? Yeah.
and that's what I want people to realize is it's okay, right? I mean, we live in this connection economy, this experience economy, this attention economy, whatever word you want to
I
wrap
love all
around
of those.
this. But here's the thing is are we in an engagement economy, right? There's so if we
Mhm.
just use what if we just use this platform, right? How we're communicating or let's just use LinkedIn, right? For an example. You want true engagement? Then humanize yourself. When somebody comments, put some thought behind it. Bring you out. Humanize yourself.
Mhm.
That's why I always took the stance that regardless of the piece of content that I put out there, if somebody comments on it, it's my responsibility, Aaron, to
Mhm.
comment back to further the conversation.
Right.
It's an easy transition to take that right off of line. But if
And
somebody
give
says,
and give
hey,
value too.
yeah, absolutely. But there's
Yeah.
too many high fives and all this stuff, right?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
okay. But what are you going to do with it, right?
Mhm. I mean, you never know. I mean, I'll give you a great example. So, people comment on some posts that I do on LinkedIn, and someone will ask a question. Well, what about such and such? And I'll go, you know what? I have an article, or I have this video, or I have something of value to give you, other than just some, I don't know, random, high level, no value add engagement. That's not engagement. I think we need to take it a little bit further because like it or not, whether you're a sales professional or whether you're a person just interested in growing your career, social is where it's at. And as a coach, I can tell you that when it comes to expanding your career, you need to have a presence and be very cognizant of how you drive that presence. And in fact, Art here is asked, what is the balance, Larry, of presenting who you are and creating a facade of yourself just to influence people? And I think, as Larry mentioned, if that facade, are you influencing the people you want to influence? And so,
Well, it's funny. So Art, when I hear the word facade, it reminds me of chapter 10 of my book. And chapter 10 of my book's all about being an empty suit.
mm-hmm.
And I always say, so now I'm going to date everybody here for a little bit. I remember as a kid watching this show called Fantasy Island. You remember that, Aaron?
Yeah.
The plane, right? So now, but I think Fantasy Island's alive and well. It's called Social, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and Brene Brown talks about it in Gifts of Imperfection so well,
Yeah.
that people are living a life online that a vast majority of them aren't leading offline.
Absolutely correct.
They're living this alternative lifestyle online because
Mm-hmm.
they're insecure or whatever the case may be. I'm not here to, again,
Mm-hmm.
say what's right or wrong, but I will tell you this. It's easy to socially poke holes because you can smell insincerity. But conversely, you can smell sincerity. You can smell how somebody's positioned themselves online. You can tell by how they carry themselves, the words they use, and
Mm-hmm.
so forth. But
Right.
I always, and because I write about it in the book, I talked about sales chaos and so forth. I said, if you lead that real, genuine lifestyle face to face,
Mm-hmm.
then why can't you do that online? Why
That's right.
can't you be that genuine, real person?
You want to
There's
know
so
why?
many,
Because people are afraid of sharing who they are because they haven't worked on themselves. Full circle.
but it, but it's fine, right? I mean,
True.
you get what you get with me. I mean, I don't hide anything. I literally don't hide anything. And that's why I say, business is personal. Business is absolutely personal in
Mm-hmm.
my book.
Yeah.
It, especially with everything that we're going through now, I want somebody, this is what you get. Regardless if you meet me face to face, or you listen to the podcast, or you listen to the
Mm-hmm.
audio version of the book, you follow me on any social platform, I don't hide anything. I really don't. You get what you get with me.
That's right. Yeah. And it's funny because that's why I walked up to you after that presentation, after that event. I walked up to Larry. I said, I got to meet this guy because he's real. you know, because you see them, and for those of you tuning in, you've met people like that, or you've seen those particular TV personalities, right? They're all glamorous and wonderful when the camera's rolling, and when it's not, they're a real jerk, or they don't give people the time of day, and they're not really a good person. They're not in it to give value to other people. And Kurt mentions, he says, you're dating yourself, Larry.
That's okay, right? I'm just so everyone knows I'm double nickels. I turned 55, so I don't care. And that might be the Kurt that I think it is. Then he knows.
Yeah, and Kurt also says business is personal. Absolutely. Screw B2B or B2C. It's P2P, person to person. Amen. Thank you, Kurt. That was good.
Okay, but okay, let's just play on that for a second.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because, so full disclosure, I'm going to throw something else out there. I remember a long time ago, I was deathly petrified to use the phone as a salesperson. Right? Think about that one for a second. I was surprised. I was surprised. I got to where I was at by being so scared to use the phone for such a long time. And then I remember hiring my first coach. And I, just so everyone knows, I hired my very first business coach in my early 40s. And I remember one of the very first things that this person helped me with was the phone. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember this as plain as day, but it plays off this people to people. This
Right.
person says, are you afraid to engage in a conversation with your friends? No. Are you afraid in a face-to-face network environment to walk up to people you don't know and engage in conversation? I said, no. Then here's what I'd like for you to do. When you pick up the phone, pretend that you're calling a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, instantaneously, my fear of using the phone stopped.
That's right.
And because I knew how I connected with my friends, I knew how I connected face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that people to people. It's just another human on the phone. And I had to get past that. I had to
Right.
set aside the title. They can't see me. I don't know what they're going to say. And
Mm-hmm.
just engage and start a conversation like I was speaking to a friend. As
That's right.
simple as that sounds, it worked for me.
Absolutely. And that's the magic behind it, truly, is seeing people for people. And sometimes people ask me, or early in my career, I really never had a fear, I guess, of talking to anyone, even the CEO. It never bothered me. You're like, you're what? Like, that's the head man, we talk to that lady or man or whatever. I was like, well, they put their pants on just like I do.
Yeah.
Pretty sure they're a human being just like I am, and they have their hopes, dreams, fears, wishes, right? People are people. I mean, you can connect to people at that human level. That's that's when the magic happens. But if you get caught up in titles and the facade, as you mentioned earlier, or Art rather mentioned earlier, you know, that's that's when you trip up, right?
Yeah, and so I'll throw a sales spin on this, is because I grew up. So yeah, I mean, you already know this. I'm a sales geek and a sports nerd. Those are two things I just geek out on all day long. I could talk about sports and sales all day long. Here's the issue though, and I think the reason why so many people in sales have a hard time connecting or find it difficult is throughout the years we've been programmed to drive sales centric conversations.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And I came from the mindset that nothing happens in sales until you open a regular conversation with somebody.
It's true. Same thing with networking. Same thing with,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, anything, any relationship building. I mean, sales is about building relationships. It's never, I think, you know what, Larry? What do you think about this? If we could change, like, takes this cultural idea of sales and throw it away and just ignore that, because I think that assumption of behavior is what gets in people's way. Does that make sense? And instead, just it's relationship building is what it is. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
and it's so well, boy, we could peel this back, you know, 6 ways to Sunday, but there's transactional sales, right? There's some channels where you play off of the transaction. It's really hard to build relationships in a transactional setting.
Mm,
Really is. But I always say this is if you start a conversation in a transactional manner, that whole relationship, that whole journey is nothing but a transaction that will be
mm,
replaced by somebody else who comes along with a better transactional conversation,
no.
right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And first of all, we can't make sales go away. Sales is the lifeblood of everything, right?
Well, that's not
But
what I meant. But I meant
yeah, no, I hear you.
the I don't know, the mindset that you have to act this way and this certain thing should happen, and it's all about numbers and making the sale is important, but you won't make the sale if you don't build the relationship in a lot of situations.
Okay, but now we got to clearly define what a relationship looks like, right? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
I think so many people. I'm going to throw the likability factor into this,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
There's so many people who go, "Gosh, Aaron's got to like me, right? I want Aaron to like me." Well, I remember as early on in my sales career, I struggled with that, and I lost many deals, right? I became friends with a lot of people who didn't buy from me.
Mm-hmm.
I want us to be seen as credible and trustworthy, right? caring, respectful, appreciative. I like my friends. I love my friends. I also like my clients and love my clients. But I think so many people, sales has got this stigma, and rightfully so, that what happens if we just clean the slate and it's just another human having a conversation with another human.
Yeah.
And then that leads. So I'm a big believer in this. The way to build relationships with people is engage by asking great questions and driving engaging conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Two critical things that you need to do in sales.
Right.
And if you struggle with those, it's going to be hard to develop relationships with people. And in
Mm-hmm.
order to build relationships with people, you got to scratch below the surface. And the way you scratch below the surface is ask deep, meaningful questions
Yeah.
and get people to engage back. And I always say this, and I think this is a missing part of sales, is I want salespeople to make somebody feel so comfortable that they share with you uncomfortable business things going on in their office. Think about that one for a second.
Yeah. That's pretty powerful. And that requires a lot of influence. And in order to influence people, it's interesting. When I was completing my certification in leadership psychology, they mentioned influence. Often people think of it as backwards, like we have influence backwards. When we think of influence, we think, well, what can I get out of people? Instead of thinking, how can I add value to people? What do they value that I can bring? And in that course, they mentioned the sweet spot is where you can bring tremendous value to someone that costs you very little, right? And then the law of reciprocity kicks in, and so that may or may not apply to sales, but influence. Those people who are natural at influencing are those people who care about people and are comfortable demonstrating that in real tangible ways.
No, spot on, because I always say this, the way that you really connect with somebody is you got to show how much you care and you got to bring compassion to the equation. And if you don't do those, you'll connect, but you're never going to really connect.
Hmm.
If you get what I'm cooking.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, that's true. So, Larry, what other questions do you have? Would love to hear from anybody that's tuning in right now. And if you are just hopping on, feel free to say hi and say where you're from. We'd love to hear from you. And any comments or questions in the chat. And don't forget to check out Larry at sellingfromtheheart.net. Is that correct?
You got it.
It's on the event description, so you'll find it there. And be sure to pick up a copy of his book, Selling from the Heart. It's really awesome. So what other golden nuggets, Larry, do you have to share with these fine people that are joining us?
So I'll throw another one out. And this is, I call it sales funnel right now. You have some listeners that may not be in sales, but they still have, this will still play out. I always share with people, if you want to have an ever-flowing sales funnel, you have to build an ever-flowing relationship funnel.
Oh, yes, that's good.
So let's think about this for a second. And so when I work with sales teams and individuals and at leadership level, I ask them to think about these things. So I always engage with people. Hey, tell me, Aaron, what's a win that you had today? And when you ask a salesperson, what's a win that you've had today?
Yeah.
They instantaneously go to sale, right? I didn't make a sale today. Okay, well, that's fine, right? I'm going to ask people to set this aside. This is how my concept around the relationship funnel ties into a sales funnel. So I want us to think about these things. What's one new connection that you made today? What's one new relationship you started today? What's one new relationship you started inside one of your clients, somebody you didn't know? What's something new that you learned today? If you do those things every single day, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, I promise you this, you will have a really full sales funnel.
Mm-hmm.
But I sincerely believe in my heart that the reason why sales funnels are as anemic as they are in some cases is many of us lack the relationship building skills necessary. We only know a few people, right? And we ride the relationship roller coaster, we ride the sales roller coaster, the
Mm-hmm.
prospecting roller coaster, and it's a never-ending battle. It's why in Selling from the Heart I write about this. One thing I do know about salespeople is they're consistently inconsistent.
Right. Yeah.
Just bring consistency and discipline to what you do and make things non-negotiable and hold yourself accountable.
Yeah. It's interesting because when we first set up this call, Larry dropped a bomb on me. He said, Aaron, what do you think about this? How many people feel that they actually have influence? And for those of you tuning in, how many of you share, pop in the chat? Do you feel like you truly have influence? And to segue off what you just talked about having that relationship funnel, if you are in sales or whether you are just a professional who wants to expand your network, it's all about keeping your network warm like good coffee. You should never let it grow cold. And as a coach, well, the biggest mistakes I see people do is they don't touch base with their network until they need something. Then it's going to take time, and sometimes it's almost too late. You need to keep it warm like good coffee. But some people say yes, they do feel like they have influence.
So here, I want to play off of what you just said, and I'm gonna just take it just one step deeper. Is if you fail to invest, you will never be able to collect.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this play out in whatever career that you all are in? Is if you fail to invest in yourself, if you fail to invest in your relationships, if you
Mm-hmm.
fail to invest in your network, if you fail to invest in your professional growth, you will never be able to collect and reap any of the benefits that has to offer.
Yes, very true. You have to invest because you can't do nothing and expect something in return. World doesn't work like that.
Waiting doesn't. There's nothing happens when you wait.
Right, exactly. If you put nothing out, you get nothing in return.
Well,
So
that's simple, right?
yeah,
But yet it's so complicated, Aaron. It's I so I so I got to tell you a funny story. So, but this plays. This is simple in my book, but yet it's not simple for others. So I'm gonna take everyone back. I just got to share this story because it's been ingrained in my head forever and a day. So my mother-in-law's from Mississippi and my father-in-law's from Oklahoma. And yes, they are as redneck as they get and they love it. And I love them for it, right? They're just down to earth people. So I remember as I was dating my wife, and I'll be married 28 years in a couple weeks. So thank you. I remember when I was dating my wife and we were all sitting at the table and we were just talking. And I remember this as plain as day. And my mother-in-law still to this day calls me boy. Even back then when she wasn't my mother-in-law, she still calls me boy. But I'm not going to do the twang, right? Because she's got a twang. I think it's just, I can hear her talk all day long. I just love the accent. But she says, boy, let me tell you something. If you can't do the little things right, you will never be able to do the big things right.
that's wisdom.
And then I'll take it one step farther because then she goes on to say this. So I'm young in my sales career, right? And she goes, boy, let me tell you something else. She goes, don't half-ass anything. Right? And I go,
I love it.
what? I go, and she says, listen, if you're going to do something, do it 100%. Don't half-ass. Think about that as you marry my daughter and all that. I took that to heart, Aaron, and I
Yeah.
took that same philosophy to my sales career.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't do the little things right, I'll never be able to do the big things right. I hold myself accountable and I don't half-ass anything. And I do it consistently every single day.
Yep. Consistency pays off. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or you're just, a professional in any career. Consistency pays off.
Yeah.
it's funny because so many people want this flash in the pan, my way, right away, Burger King society. We all want instant gratification. Consistency pays off. Cornelia just mentioned, she said, I don't think I have influence, but others tell me I do all the time. Cornelia, you do. We all do. We all have so much more influence and impact we give ourselves credit for because we are influencing people all the time. The problem is we're not responsible with it because we're not aware and intentional.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take that. So I'm taking that one step farther. And it goes back to believability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna say, if you don't believe that you have influence, then you don't have influence.
It's true.
I mean, it's not a rocket science moment, but it's pretty simple, and it just goes back to I've dealt with this before, right? I've dealt with the insecurities. I've dealt with beating myself up. I've dealt with imposter syndrome. I always say comparison's a thief of all joy, right? It's one of the greatest quotes that's out there, and I've paid the price for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it took me a while, just to bring in the selling from the heart message to the forefront and all that. Is still to this day, I mean, I just wrote the book and bringing the message to the forefront because I believe it needs to be heard. And I'm willing to say the things that a lot of people dance around, and I'll hit them head on. Mm-hmm. But I learned a lot in writing Selling from the Heart and through the podcast and all that. I learned a lot about me. My confidence soared, right? Mm-hmm. My self-worth soared. My believability in myself soared.
Mm-hmm. And results paid off.
Because
when you believe in yourself, okay, so mindset moment. Whatever mindset we have is a self-fulfilling prophecy because it is an automatic program we don't even have to think about. And it drives all our behaviors and how we respond to any situation. So if you don't, let's take, for example, Larry, I'm sure you've experienced this. If you didn't believe in yourself as a salesperson, you might not pick up that phone, right?
True.
Yeah. I mean, same thing as in any profession. If you don't believe in yourself, let's say you're a job seeker, you're looking for jobs, if you don't believe yourself, you may not, even bother to apply for that job because you think it's too big of a stretch for you. And actually it's a great fit. But you're not seeing that because your mindset's driving your behaviors. And what was it? I think Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right.
Yeah. So here's something to chew on about this whole believability and self-confidence and all that.
Mm-hmm.
If you lack that internally, now that's I'm going to flip this one on its head, Aaron. Now take that out into the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
And if that oozes from your pores, if that oozes through your conversations, do you think your clients catch on to it?
Absolutely.
They catch on to it in your conversation, in your mannerisms, in how you interact with them, how you respond to an email, how you respond to a question on a phone call.
And right? You're not even aware of it.
And you're not aware of it.
You have no clue. It's all automatic. Yeah.
Hey, is that a cup of coffee or is that a cup of water?
Oh man, I'm super parched. Welcome to Texas. I was just telling Larry last night, I was like, it cooled down to 91, so I went outside and did yoga. You're from Texas if you think cool is 91, but it's water. I already had my coffee. But what's interesting, probably a lot of people are asking themselves, okay, great, you're talking about self-confidence, you believe in yourself, right? But I don't even know where to start believing in myself. And for that, that takes a lot of unpacking. And I know I've been through it, Larry, you've been through it. When it comes to influence, we can't influence that which we don't have. So right back to the beginning of our conversation, the first person you influence is yourself. And through this process, you start to learn that you have more value than you give yourself credit for, that you have more impact than you start giving yourself credit for. And one of the exercises I encourage people to do is, if you feel comfortable, now some people are super reserved, get over it, do it anyway. It's very helpful. And people will appreciate you for it, believe it or not. reach out to those people in your close network and say, hey, just tell me one thing that you know about me that you admire, appreciate, or that inspires you or influences you in a positive way. And when you do that and you get that response back, you will be blown away. Believe me, you have more
Yeah.
impact than you give yourself credit for.
Oh, absolutely. So there's two things I want to play off of that. Is because in the self-reflection journal, the Selling from the Heart, I challenge
Mm,
people to do this.
yeah.
Is go to your centers of influence and your friends, close family members. Ask them words they would use to describe yourself.
Hmm.
That's one. Second thing is I'm right here and I have them with me, and this might help people. Is you can probably see on camera, really can't see them, but there's a series of index cards.
Yeah.
And these are 3x5 cards. They're at my desk. When I travel, I take them with me in my laptop bag. I'm a big believer in the power of I am statements.
Yes. Hmm.
And so I learned this a long time ago. Where my brain works the best is first thing dark 30 in the morning. And I sit and I self-reflect
Hmm.
and I think about me, and I sit in this office right here, dark, complete dark, right? I sit in the chair behind me and I just think, right?
Hmm.
Think about what I did yesterday. Think about what I need to do today. Who have I helped, right? What can I give back to? And I do that for half an hour, just thoughts that run through my mind and so forth. Then I kick on the light. I read these. It takes me
Hmm.
5 minutes and I read each card because it goes back to a long time ago. I beat the crap out of myself.
Yes.
And I was my own worst enemy. Then when I found out the power of I am statements, I read them every single day
Hmm. Yep. I
to
always
keep
have to
that.
remind myself, I've been through a huge thing of self-confidence as well. I've been through it and it sabotaged my career big time because
Yeah.
I didn't own my impact. I didn't think I had any influence. I didn't give myself enough credit because I couldn't influence myself. I was just not owning that. And I had impact. It was just negative
Yeah.
because I wasn't responsible with it. And when we don't appreciate who we are and gives ourselves space and grace, it can lead to a self-fulfilling toxic environment. And that does nobody any good. It doesn't do you any good. And I guess one of the things that helped kick me into a more positive cycle was just thinking, okay, are any of these thoughts helping me achieve my goal? Is
Yeah.
this doing me any good at all? Yes, no. No, scrub them. What will help me? Am I helping me? Am I being my own best friend?
Oh, it's so spot on because, I mean, Lord knows I beat the crap out of myself tons of times. But what good's it do, right? It just, when it's all said and done, I feel worse after beating myself up than I
All
did
right.
if I didn't beat myself up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Larry, it's been a great pleasure having you on. I really loved talking with you about this, expanding your influence, increasing your impact, owning your own impact, and being able to influence yourself, not only for, to expand your sales influence, but to expand your influence in general as a professional. Check Larry out at sellingfromtheheart.net. Be sure to check out his podcast with Daryl, Amy. It's super awesome. I love both of them. They do a fantastic job.
Well, you've
So
been a
much
guest,
fun.
Aaron.
I know it is so much fun. I mean, just being on the podcast was fun. So do check them out. And if you are watching this later, feel free to pop in your comments in the chat. We will answer them. And it's been a pleasure, Larry. Thank you so much. And all the best. Until next time, my friend, and all my friends out there and LinkedIn and Facebook. This Career Coffee Chat, Aaron Urban, Larry Levine. Talk to you next time.
Bye, guys.